Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today we'll be studying the Constitution, Article 1, Sections 8 through 10. As you grab Michael Holler's book, I'd like to thank you for joining us as we take one step further on our journey through the history and foundation of the United States of America. Why did this nation separate? How was it set up? What do we need to do to keep it going? Join us as we discuss these questions and more. Would you like to be a part of what we're doing? Pray for each other and for us, fellowship in your own study, then go forth and make disciples. All right, I am reading first. Article 1, Section 8. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. To borrow money on the credit of the United States, to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes, to establish an uniform rule of naturalization and uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcies throughout the United States, to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and a foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures, to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the United States, to establish post offices and post roads, to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive rights to their respective writings and discoveries, to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court, to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations, to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water, to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for longer term than 2 years, to provide and maintain a navy, to make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces, to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 miles square as may, by cession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of the government for the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislator of the state, in which the same shall be for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful fillings, and to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. Ah,
Yeah, lengthy this time. All right, I'm going to read sections 9 and 10.
okay.
The migration or importation of such persons as any of the states now existing shall think proper to admit shall not be prohibited by the Congress prior to the year 1888, but a tax or duty may be imposed on some such importation not exceeding $10 for each person. The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended, unless when in case of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. No bill of attainder or ex post facto law shall be passed. No capitation or other direct tax shall be laid, unless in proportion to the census or enumeration herein before directed to be taken, changed by the 16th Amendment. No tax or duty shall be laid on articles exported from any state. No preference shall be given by any regulation of commerce or revenue to the ports of one state over those of another, nor shall vessels bound to or from one state be obliged to enter, clear, or pay duties in another. No money shall be drawn from the treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law, and a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. No title of nobility shall be granted by the United States, and no person holding any office of profit or trust under them shall, without the consent of Congress, accept of any present emolument, office, or title of any kind whatever from any king, prince, or foreign state. Section 10. No state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of mark and reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts, pass any bill of attainder, ex post facto law, or law impairing the obligation of contracts, or grant any title of nobility. No state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any imposts or duties on imports or exports, except what may be absolutely necessary for executing its inspection laws. And the net produce of all duties and imposts laid by any state on imports or exports shall be for the use of the Treasury of the United States, and all such laws shall be subject to the revision and control of the Congress. No state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty of tonnage, keep troops or ships of war in times of peace, enter into any agreement or compact with another state or with a foreign power, or engage in war unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay.
All right. First thoughts.
Section 9 and 10 were kind of difficult to understand. I'm not gonna lie.
Yep.
Wouldn't have minded reading the English version of that.
The modern English. Yeah.
So first thought, I really thought section 8 was very specific.
Hmm.
Like the things that they gave them the power to do, are these all in like inclusive? Like this is it? Like this list is exhaustive?
This is the exhaustive list of the powers of Congress.
Um, Now they didn't separate them by house. Like this is what the
Right.
House of Representatives can do. This is what the Senate can do. So how do they decide that?
Back in their rules of what the House can do and what bills start in the House and then go to the Senate. So, and these are the things that Congress can affect.
These are the things that they can make bills about.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Well,
very.
I can't even say make bills about. I'm not sure that's exactly the right term. Because well, the way I said it, these are the things they can affect. There are so many things in America that can be affected by Congress. It's limited to these things. They can write bills about anything they want, but if it's constitutional or not comes down to what's written here. So we'll get into that a little bit as we get into the text here. My first thought after reading this whole general thing is once again the separation of powers. Um, actually, I'm gonna get right into it. In the beginning of this section, there's this term general welfare that our modern ears have turned into something that it's not. So let me read this first part. To lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. And this is also in the preamble of the Constitution. General promote the general welfare is the direct terms. This is general welfare, not specific welfare. When we hear welfare, we think of help for the poor. When they're saying general welfare, anybody can take advantage of it. So this does not say that it provides welfare because welfare, as we understand it, is specific to poor people.
Mhm.
That is not Congress's job. Their job is to be an overarching welfare for everybody can take advantage of to keep an even playing field. In fact, in this first paragraph here, um, all duties shall be uniform throughout the United States. The federal government cannot penalize states or support certain states or penalize certain states. It's got to keep things uniform. In fact, later we read that it says it cannot force trade through a state and to pay duties to that state. So wherever that ship is going is where that ship is going, and they have to deal with that state when they arrive. They aren't forced to stop by New York or Savannah or Miami on their way to somewhere else. If they want to, they can, but that's a whole different conversation. So as we look into this, this is all overarching. The way I like to put it is the federal government is the government of black lines. That's where it has its authorities. The states have property inside of their own states, and the federal government takes care of the black lines to make sure they're all the same all the way around. So that's my first thought.
Yeah, really well said.
Thank you. So, oh boy. Well, yeah, let's get into this. I mean, it really is face value. It does have the job to lay and collect taxes to tax people. That is Congress's role. Um, but here's what it provides for: the common defense and general welfare of the United States. And as I said earlier, they still must be uniform throughout the United States. So, as we'll read in a little bit, the United States military is not constitutional, except they figured out how to kind of they found their own loophole. But because the United States military is necessary for the common defense of the states, we let it slide. Now we can have a different discussion on is it supposed to be overseas right now? That's a whole different discussion. But the United States military is designed to protect the whole of the states, not just New York, Texas, Washington.
Not that Texas would need any protecting anyway. They
Man,
got an army there anyway.
you know, after Mexico invaded and they lost, you'd think people would have learned.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if you want to get into it, but I would like to hear more about why the military would be considered unconstitutional. I don't know if
let's
you
get
want to make
into it. Let me skip the next one to borrow money on the credit of the United States. That's self. Don't need to go into that. To regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. So it is the intermediary between states and nations. You have to go through the federal government, through those black lines first. Let me keep going.
Actually, I want to stop there for a second. So to regulate trade with foreign nations, so the tariffs were all in the news a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So that had to originate in Congress, if
Hmm.
that's true. And then so I guess since
To regulate commerce. Um,
the English version said, or the
yeah.
modern English version says trade.
So that's a real question there. Do the tariffs have to come through the I'm gonna say yes. On face value, I'm gonna have to say yes. But as we're going about to talk about with the Army with the United States military in a little bit, the way things are not the way things are supposed to be, or is not the way that they put down. And there's another one coming up where you read it was the 16th Amendments. Can't wait to get to that a little bit. Um, but as part of it, now to regulate commerce, if Trump says, I want to tariff these states, as an example, and Congress says no, then Trump can't. If they say we're ambivalent, go ahead, because Trump is the executor of the executive branch, the executive branch, the executive branch. I'm already starting to turn into a pumpkin. I've got 25 minutes to stay human. Okay, I'm going to do my best. The executive branch is there to execute the laws of Congress. So if Trump points back to a law that Congress made that says I can tariff you, then he has the authority to tariff them because he is executing that law.
Hmm. Okay.
And this is a conversation that goes back to all executive. Shoot, man, I'm turning into a pumpkin. It's the black books he signed day one, signed 100 of them, executive orders. Those are his orders that point back to a law that he starts executing inside the executive branch. But they all have to point back to a law to be legal. We had that conversation back with President Obama, whether some of his executive decisions were constitutional because they didn't quite point back to a law that existed already.
Hmm.
So there have been presidents. Another one is Woodrow Wilson, which is going to be big because he did a lot of changes to the Constitution, who wrote executive orders that were unconstitutional. And the next person, Calvin Coolidge, signed executive orders that canceled out those executive orders because they were not constitutional. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the the process once the president issues an executive order, what's the process for deciding if it's unconstitutional or not? Where does that process begin?
Supreme Court, somebody sues him.
Okay, so yeah, but somebody has to bring that motion up. The Supreme Court can't just
Yeah,
rule that it's unconstitutional. Okay,
correct.
okay.
So if he
Uh,
says I'm charging China 300% tariffs, somebody will be like, that might be a bit excessive. I don't think that's exactly what the law said. And then they can bring it up and blah, blah, blah. And there are some stuff happening right now in there that are challenging some of the executive decisions he's made. So we'll see how those shake out.
would that start at the Supreme Court, or does that have to go through all the lower courts first and then make its way to the Supreme Court?
Um, the Supreme Court chooses which lawsuits it picks up, so it has to start in a lower court. But
Yeah.
if the Supreme Court says, you know what, we're taking that from you, because down here it says to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Courts,
Yeah.
which translated into modern English to create lower courts under the Supreme Court. That's the Supreme Court can say, you know what, we're just fast tracking that one up here. We're going to talk about it now. Come here. That's mine now. If they choose, or they can just say no. Um, I heard a statistic. I think the Supreme Court only gets to like 10% of lawsuits, judicial things that actually get applied to them. They can only choose like 10%.
Oh, okay. I thought you were
So,
saying 10% of all lawsuits. I was like, wow, that seems
no,
really astronomically high.
10% that make it that high.
Hmm.
That usually takes a lot of money to make it past the circuit judges.
Right. So, because for the in order to go to the next level, like what does that process look like? Because we're kind of getting off track, I'm sure, but like what does it take to advance up the ranks of the court system? Like how do you
Appeals,
decide?
appeals,
So you just
money,
appeal to a higher court?
money, and appeals.
Hmm.
If you don't like what the court said, you can appeal to a higher court. You got to build a new case based on why that court was wrong. And you got to appeal up. And if they say, no, that court's right, leave me alone, they can say that.
You just keep appealing and appealing and appealing.
Well, once the court says I'm not taking that up, then that's dead issue.
Oh, okay, I
That
see.
that stands. That lower court's decision stands.
Okay. So it
It's got
just
to,
stops.
yeah,
So the higher up court has to decide to even take the lawsuit. Okay.
yeah.
I gotcha. That makes sense.
Take the case. Yep.
That's so cool. All right.
So yeah, they do that to establish a unit. Old English has an uniform rule of naturalization. To establish standard rules for becoming a naturalized citizen and establish standard laws about bankruptcy through the United States. So that's a big topic right now is what is a natural citizen? Um, Personally, I am for taking a civics test before you vote.
Yeah, I mean, you have to take a civics test to become a citizen.
Yeah, no, not
Oh,
naturally
you
born.
just mean in general.
Yes, before you're allowed to vote and become a citizen, you have to take a civics test
I
and
completely.
probably some time of actually living in America. That's my personal thought. You know,
So, why do you think the writers of the Constitution lumped those two very different things together? Talking about who's a citizen, and they lumped bankruptcies in there together. Why do you think they did that?
uniform, have the same laws on the books for both subjects. They are saying that this is a federal matter.
Yeah.
So Alabama cannot choose who is a citizen and who is not. And this led to some wars later on. This is part of what started ending slavery, this section right here, and led to the 13th, 14th, and 10th, sorry, 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th. I forget. We'll get to the amendments. Spoiler alert, I'm turning into a pumpkin and we'll get to the amendments. But what led to those amendments, redefining what a naturalized citizen is and what that authority is, because it's got to be uniform across all 50 states what a citizen is.
That's fascinating too. They had the foresight to kind of set that into motion. I wonder what else they had the foresight to say, like, oh, well, we're not gonna, you know, abolish, for lack of a better word, what you're doing now, but we're gonna set the groundwork to abolish it later on.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
That went all the way back to the Declaration of Independence. One of the complaints was that King George forced abolitionist states to have slavery as a law.
Really?
Yeah, way back in the day. Um, I want to say Pennsylvania and Massachusetts, but I'm not terribly sure on that. And I know if David Barden is watching me, he's screaming at the monitor because I really just screwed up all the lessons I learned from him. But but that's what we have. It was there were two abolitionist countries, states in 1776, and they were both in the original 13 colonies of America. It was later that Great Britain, through William Wilberforce, abolished slavery and then fought the slave trade. And that then it was the Civil War where America paid a bloody price to end slavery in America. So, all the way back here. To coin money, regulate the value thereof. Don't know if the Fed is legal or not, but if the Congress says that the Fed is legal, it may be illegal and it just needs to be taken care of that way. I know I probably just ticked off some people, but that's okay. To provide for the punishment of counterfeiting fitting money. Now, here's a fun one to establish post offices and post roads. I love that one because it says they can make the highway. This is where the highway department comes into being because
Hmm.
that's how we get post, um, trade, everything happening across the states. And that is one of the purviews of the federal government to make those roads manageable right here.
Is that only on roads that cross state lines or all roads in general? Is that a federal thing?
Post roads. Who receives postage? Barack Obama said about those roads, you didn't build that, but without businesses, there'd be nowhere for those roads to go. So it is the government's job to build the roads to the businesses and to the people who exist.
All of them.
All of them. State routes. So, like, I lived in Washington State. Guess what? Our speed limit signs look exactly the same. Our exit signs look exactly the same, although Florida Department of Transit has dropped the ball on placement of signs, but they all are uniform in appearance and easy to read in the same length, in not just same language, but same format in what the arrows mean and what the colors are, so that you're not dealing with different states having different colors of signs and all that too. So There was a massive brouhaha because Montana didn't have speed limits because if you went 30 miles an hour and you were on a 60-mile dirt road, you were driving for 2 hours as opposed to one. So federal government said you need to start having speeding tickets. And they're like, all right. So they started pulling people over and said, I caught you going 65 into 30. Here's a $5 ticket. I accept cash. Have a good day. Sorry. By the way, I'll be back to buy a gallon of milk. $5? Okay, I'll be right back to buy some milk.
Yeah, exactly.
Type deal going on. Tomorrow at the park. Here's one where people love to put a period where a comma is. To promote the progress of science and useful arts, comma,
Yeah.
by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. Copyright, patent office, right here.
Yeah, that could definitely be misconstrued, and it is.
Yeah,
That's how we end up supporting outrageous things all over the world.
yeah. But the important thing about this is this was a relatively new invention, protecting people's intellectual property. They get paid for it. You can't take that from them. That's their idea. There's all sorts of court cases where somebody came out with something 5 years before somebody else did and made a ton of money off of it, who could then go back. For example, I cannot email Weird Al Yankovic a song idea because if he made it and made money, I could sue him to get all those proceeds back. Or if I made something, he never even saw the email. Let's say it's about um, Kermit the Frog, and he makes the Yoda song, which is similar. Then I can say him saying he ripped off my Kermit the Frog song to make his Yoda song, which were both Muppets. So yeah, there's that kind of thing. It is a two-edged sword, but people do they need to have their intellectual properties, their inventions protected, and not just widely distributed. Like government saying this is ours now, and we can give it to whoever we want. It's like no, this is something I invented. This is my creation, and you'll pay me respect for that creation. Is it real? It's flesh. Oh, sorry, weird science. You're too young to understand. Um, to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court, we just discussed that. To define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations. Once again, that's the big border outside of the United States that they're in charge of. To raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money. Here's going back to that earlier question. But no appropriation of money to that use shall be for longer term than 2 years. So, how we have a standing military that doesn't break down every 2 years is that every 2 years there is a new spending bill. And this is one of the jobs of the House of Representatives every 2 years. And this is where a lot of porkers comes in. And they make a new spending bill to support the military and they throw everything behind it on that and this is the big omnibus bill, supports the military and blah 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 blah. And if you don't know on it, you don't like the military, and that's how they've conned a lot of people into voting yes on an omnibus bill.
Hmm.
But it keeps the United States military, that is very important, very powerful, and I am very terrified of falling into the wrong hands. Um, Keeps it funded every 2 years. So, so technically, it's not a standing army. It just gets refunded every 2 years.
Yeah, it's an easy way around that loophole.
Yeah,
Really crazy thought to think if we didn't have a standing army, like we wouldn't be the most powerful country in the world without a standing army.
yeah. Well, and as we read a little bit later, except for the Navy is supposed to be federal, but the militia of the local militias were supposed to be the main military force in America. So Civil War is a great example of this. It's more clear cut. Lee had his Virginia volunteers. They were all men from the state of Virginia from several towns. They were all companies of men. A cannonball blast would wipe out a town's generation, but that's how it was. When you see those old documentaries, Joshua Chamberlain was ran some volunteers down. I think from oh, people are going to say I don't know what I'm talking about if I say the wrong state. So I'm guessing Vermont. And everybody from where he's really from is either cheering me or cursing my name right now. Um, but it was all volunteers from his town that he brought south to fight in the Civil War. And so it was all the townspeople would be the militia. All the men, sorry, all the men from the town would form their own militia to go fight. And in most cases, they were defensive. These were the militias that helped in the French Franco-Indian War to defend the colonies from the Indian invasions and the British invasions from the north, who fought off in 1812 and where George Washington got his troops for the um, Revolution. I'm turning into a pumpkin. We got 8 minutes left, but that's what it was supposed to be. So honestly, I kind of wonder if we should go back to that kind of system. But instead, we have the branches of the military who all go and train together, and they're just incorporated that they're everybody from every state because once again, what happened was a cannon blast would wipe out a town. But if you took some guys from here and you took some guys from here and you took some guys from here and you put them together in one unit, and that unit got destroyed, then it wasn't one town being wiped off the map in one battle.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Yeah, completely destroy a town with one cannonball. Wow.
See, for example, Saving Private Ryan. Sent the four brothers to the four corners of the earth, and three of them got killed. Not based on a true story, but that's the example for this. Um, to raise and support armies, yeah, we did that. To provide and maintain a navy. Oh, there are historians about the Navy who really want to put their words in here, and I invite them to put the link in your video about the origins of the American Navy below, please. I'd love that stuff. To make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. So once again, each state had its militia, but the federal government regulate, don't want to use that term, for the government and regulation of it. We're going to see something in the Second Amendment that kind of throws a lot of this stuff, is in conflict with a lot of this stuff. Um, which when we come to, we'll have to remember this section to see what it says there and how it applies to these here. To provide for calling forth, well, let me tackle it now. A lot of people say the regulation of the militia can be used to say that the militia can have no guns. Then it's not a militia. What are they going to do? Defend their lands with pitchforks? It's like,
Back then.
so to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Later, somebody said, hey, what about if the invasion happens really quick? Later, it says, and I want to link to this really quick in section 10, no state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty tonnage, keep troops, ships of war, time of peace, enter, unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. So while the federal government can regulate the militia can raise itself if time is of the essence. Basically, the original stand your ground law. And that's in section 10. It's at the very end of our reading. So, all right, let's keep running. My voice is giving out. To provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia. So this spells out what the government and regulation of land and naval forces are. This is where it's spelled out in the end of section 8. Their job is to provide for the militias. organization, arming, disciplining the militia, and and governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of turning the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. So the states are still in charge of who runs the militias while the federal government gives them supplies.
So militia, though, I mean, that's like the National Guard in modern day terms. I mean,
Not even that. It's so I live in an apartment community. A militia could be the apartment community militia, and that guy's the officer, and Congress has to supply for them back in those days.
so I mean, this really doesn't have a whole lot of like, um, what's the word? Significance in today's time.
So few modern Americans are prepared for war. Back then, every town was a border town. To put it in a modern conveyance, every town was a border town that could be invaded because you know U.S. was this thick at the time, so it could be attacked from this way, very easily from across the lakes, from across the water, from across the Ohio Valley, across the Appalachian Mountains, could be attacked very simply. So for they had to have a local military force, which is different than a police force for defense of the town in case something happened. Whether the French, somebody who was ticked off at the Brits, the French, the Indians, the Spaniards, the Canadians, who haven't invented hockey yet and let it all out of their system.
Clearly, they were pissed.
Yeah, yeah. They were not so, oh, sorry at that time. But it was but that's but it was still a local military force made up of the men. Um, for example, the shot heard around the world, the first two battles of the Revolutionary War were the churchmen of those two towns, Lexington and Concord. Those were just the churchmen, the men who went to church. So you go to church, look around, it was those guys.
Yeah, so then Congress was responsible for supplying those militias with, appropriate equipment.
Provisions,
Yeah.
arming, and discipline. Yeah, but the states appointed the officers, not the federal government. So they had to work together still. So there was not a just the federal government. What remember Declaration of Independence, the judges who are appointed by the king and reliant on him for their money. This is a military force that gets the money from the king, but its leadership is local.
Yeah, they did that on purpose for sure.
Yeah. Um, this next section is a very long-winded way of saying establish Washington, D.C. and govern it. That's what came out of this section. Um, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying it into execution, the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. Fancy. So that is what they're doing now, is they are supposed to make the laws to fulfill these duties. Yep. Is somebody on your lap?
She's trying to.
Okay. Yep, there she is. I thought you were just showing the book cover, like, all right, me too. This is the book we're reading.
Oh,
Um,
almost there. Go on, go on.
so let's wrap up because I feel the pumpkin coming on. Uh, so the states can allow anybody in that they want up until 1808, and then it was changed by law. Dang, I wish we had time to study what habeas corpus is. Maybe we'll come back to that.
Yeah, we're gonna
But
have to do 9 and 10 next time.
here's the big argument right here. Because habeas corpus is in the news, the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. So that is a judgment call by those in charge. And that is about as close as we can get to it. First habeas corpus suspension was by the first Republican president, um, Abraham Lincoln. I think what it is swift speed is imprisonment with trial. Habeas corpus means that it will be suspended in cases of rebellion. You may be imprisoned without trial in cases of rebellion or invasion, and the public safety may require it. So it's
So what
only
was the example that why did Lincoln use it?
um he suspended it when well it wasn't the Civil War was not a war between North and South. It was a war between Republicans and Democrats, just to boil it way down. And there were still Northern Democrats who were spying for the Southern Democrats who were fighting against the North. So he just imprisoned. Uh, FDR was the next big one who just sent the Japanese to internment camps, which was bad, but we in the linguistically in America, we tie internment camps of America to internment camps of Germany, and they were different camps. One was meant to kill and punish people, the other was just to keep them out of the way until the war was over and might have forgotten about them. Different mindset, same tool.
Interesting.
Well, yeah. Ex post facto law is let's say I wrote a law that says everybody named Gage should be imprisoned. Okay. You were named Gage before the law came into existence. So you'd be great. They call it grandfathering. You'd be immune from your law. But if you had Gage Jr., he could be sent to jail. That's ex post facto. Very stupid version of it, but just to get the point across.
So it would work the other way too then. If you committed the crime before it became legal, you would
Illegal.
still have to serve that.
Nope. If I wrote a law, let's say you did something kind of shady.
So the big one is marijuana. All those people who got felonies or misdemeanors before it became legal, are they expunged after it becomes legal, or what happens there?
Well, that's the flip side of this.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you flip
So
it,
yeah, I don't know about the flipping, but what this does is say pot was legal, which it's not federally, but let's say pot was legal and then now it's illegal. I cannot go back and punish you for smoking pot yesterday.
yeah.
So whether those people can come out, Washington State stinks, like it smells like pot. Um, Personal thoughts on pot is edible only. Otherwise, you're just smelling bad, but that's a whole nother issue. Whether it's this does not come to the subject of, well, here it is actually, or that is retroactive. So no, that law does not retroactively free people who were found guilty of a crime back then.
Yep.
I take that back. It's right there. It's in the new reading on the right side of the page. Uh, oh, okay. 16th Amendment screwed this one up. No direct taxes may be assessed unless they are in proportion to the census. There's an exemption for income tax. Oh boy, I'm gonna tell. So I went to Woodrow Wilson High School. They didn't tell me the history of Woodrow Wilson. I know why. That dude was screwed up and really screwed up the country. But it is no capitation or other direct tax shall be laid unless in proportion to the census or enumeration herein before. directed to be taken. So originally it was a one, it was not an income tax. You just paid a tax, citizen tax, let's call it. The income tax comes in, and now we have this whole bureaucracy. We have this whole up and down payment system. We have more pages of a tax code than can fit in the room I'm sitting in. It's just insanity. So, thanks to the 16th Amendment, which should be repealed.
16th Amendment established the income tax code as we know it.
Yeah, not as we know it, but the fact that it could be. And then several laws by Congress has changed it, made loopholes, done this, done that, added this, added these papers, added these deductions, added this, and it's a monster.
Yeah,
And
it's
because
too
they're,
big.
yeah, it is ungainly, to say the least. No tax or duty shall be laid on articles exported from any state. So they cannot tariff America going out or across borders. No preference shall be given by any regulation or, here's that other part, or of commerce or revenue to the ports of one state over those of another, nor shall vessels bound to or from one state be obliged to enter, clear, or pay duties to another. No forcing people to trade with you or not trade with you, or preferential treatments. No favorite children. Looking at you, New York. So if you guys don't know, when I look over there, there's actually a map of America over there. So I'm actually looking at the states off to my right side. I'm teaching the kids about the states now. So um something about the treasury, no title of nobility. Section 10 is interesting because this is a binding on the state. This tells states no, this power is not for you. So no states shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of marque and reprisal, coin money. These are things the federal government only is allowed to do. Back in the Revolutionary War, every state had its own currency, and some states just didn't recognize other states' currency. So when a military force with that state's currency came down and defended that currency from the British invasion, the soldiers couldn't actually buy stuff to restock their needs and turned into a few disasters. So by having a central banking system, things were simplified and more easily corrupted. I had to grit my teeth for that one. I didn't like that one.
I could see that.
Yeah. But it is also necessary that my money is good in Hawaii. Or,
Yeah, it'd be an absolute mess.
yeah. It's kind of going back to the Bible. This is probably where they got it, is the money changers that Jesus whooped the snot out of. Because that's what they did, is they said, you don't have the proper currency, so we need to trade your money to the proper currency, keeping a little for ourselves, of course. Now you can take that new currency and go buy those turtle doves that you need to make the sacrifice to God. So to keep things on the level, to keep a uniform federal government, they needed to have the same currency throughout, at that time, the 13 colonies, and then as it grew into all states. And then no state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any imports or duties or on imports or exports, except what may be absolutely necessary for executing its inspection laws. So for doing its duties, it's not saying that Miami or Tampa can't charge to take care of your cargo. They can, but they can't lay taxes or tariffs on. They can just charge for the service. The tariffs must come from the federal government.
Basically the same thing, you know, tariff or charge, it's just another word.
Yeah. Fee. Um, yeah. And then we covered the final one, no state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty of tonnage, keep troops or ships of war in times of peace, enter any agreement or compact with another state, or with a foreign power or engage in war unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. So there are certain powers that only Congress is allowed to do, and the states can't. So once again, this goes back to there's five powers listed in the Constitution. There's the voter, the states, the Congress, the president, and the judiciary branch, basically the Supreme Court. Those are the five powers. And drawing those lines in between them is what the Constitution does. You can't touch this. You must touch this. And that's where we get a lot of our stuff. So, final thoughts?
Yeah, it's exhausting. Like it's really easy to see why people don't want to learn about this because it's very, very involved,
Mhm.
very convoluted.
Very thorough. That's one of the nice things about these gentlemen is they were very thorough in their studies on history and on governance because going back to it, they recognized the need for a government. They just didn't like theirs. And so they had to write something that would make a good government for all, even people who disagreed with them. Even people who disagree with us go back to our Constitution because they recognize it's a good set of rules. And this is one of the reasons why I wish instead of exporting our military and our money and our stuff, that America actually exported its morals and its constitution to give this playing field to other countries. But it's a system that can't be forced on people. It must be picked up. So that's the terrifying part. Can't force good behavior on people. You can only invite them there. So,
Preach.
all right. Did you want to close this in prayer?
Yeah, I think you've done enough talking. I'll take this one from you. Uh, Lord, we thank you for just giving us this time to come together tonight and discuss and learn and just talk about the Constitution and what it means to the country and just do our best to provide service and educate other people. And God, we just thank you for being here and leading the conversation. And Father, we just pray that you continue to use us in whatever way you see fit, and continue to lead us as we go in through the rest of the study. And yeah, we thank you for everything, Lord. It's in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.